Hi guys, and welcome back to the Female Fitness Podcast. I'm your host Danny, and today I have the pleasure of being joined by Phil Flemming, who I have had on the Female Fitness Podcast before, but a very long time ago. So I thought it'd be nice to do a bit of an update. Phil is an online coach herself and a fantastic one at that, and she's also one of my clients, and she really knows her stuff. So Phil, obviously the last time I had you on the podcast was a very long time ago, and we spoke a bit about like your journey with competing, how you did within the sport of bodybuilding, why you no longer compete, and sort of like how to make a decision on whether to compete yourself for the people listening. So where are you at now, and what are your goals sort of personally and professionally?
So I am very much fixated on hypertrophy at the moment, and just lifting because I feel good. And I think, we touched on that before, didn't we? Like in terms of competing. But now I'm very much like, I just enjoy lifting. So I lift. Doesn't mean to say I don't have physique goals at the same time. Like, that as my coach, we're working towards hypertrophy and just generally all over muscle, specifically my legs. But more so just lifting because I enjoy it. And I think that's a nice, satisfying place to be.
Yeah, I actually think it's really refreshing for people to hear that as well. I think we touched on this last time you came on the podcast, but it can be so common for people to think that you have to have some kind of like extreme goal and you have to commit your entire life to it. But actually, for a lot of people, the right thing is just to, like yourself, progress in a manner that enables you to live your life and still progress in other areas of life, and not just like conform to what everyone else is doing and what's popular.
Yeah. Honestly, I still get it now. Like the amount of people that come up to me in the gym are like, are you going to compete again? I'm like, no, like that's just not where my head's at anymore at all. Like I lift because I enjoy it. I lift in a way that makes it fit in with my life and the things that I enjoy doing. I can still have physique goals of my own and not to, please anybody else or anyone on stage. Not to say I have anything against people that compete, like we've spoken about that before, but yeah, it's just quite nice to just be in your own little bubble with it sometimes. I think how I want my physique to look as well is very different to how a judge might want me to look on stage, and that's nice because I'm just doing it because I want to look like that and not for anybody else.
Yeah, I love that. And it just shows that like you're not doing it for external validation and you're doing it for you. Do you know when people ask you those questions in the gym, like say they come up to you and they ask you about like when you're next competing, if you're thinking of competing again, why do you think people are sometimes so persistent with those questions?
Yeah, I just think it's like an expectation now. If you go to the gym and if you're in relatively good shape, you must compete, or everyone, I'm sure people do that where they've been training for a couple of years and they think the next step, the logical step is to step on stage. And it's a bit crazy when you think about it, considering how much it puts your body through. But I think it's just an expectation of everyone. And I don't know about you or where you train, but a lot of the people in my gym, like they do that. So it's the norm. Whereas for me, it's just not the route that I want to go back down.
Definitely. I think because now I've changed gyms, and the gym that I go to now, it is full of people who are, I'd say, a little bit more advanced, a little bit further into their fitness journey. They know their stuff. There's a lot of coaches there, but it's very much a mixture of like, there are some bodybuilders, but they definitely don't make up the majority of the gym. The majority of the gym are like either coaches who like don't compete, or just people in the general population who maybe take their training a bit more seriously but aren't interested in pushing to that extreme and have it consume their lives. So that's quite refreshing.
That's nice. I'd like that.
Yeah, but it is, I do agree that it's quite rare. And funnily enough, like looking back, how I actually got into competing in the first place was because I kind of fell into it because someone made that kind of comment to me. They sort of like saw that I was developing muscle tissue and they said to me, oh, like, have you ever considered competing, because you probably do pretty well? And then I was like, oh no, I haven't, but maybe I will. And that's how I
Yeah.
ended up getting into competing, when in reality, like you said, it's such an extreme and it should be so much more carefully considered.
Yeah, definitely. Especially like having experienced it, you know how much of an impact it has on your body. And it's almost scary to think that people can just fall into it because and sort of not really know what they're letting themselves in for, because it's a lot. It's a real lot.
Exactly. And so how long have you actually been in your current hypertrophy phase?
Do you know what? Someone asked me this on Instagram the other day, because I think I posted a transformation. They were like, how many dieting phases have you done between these photos? And I was like, none. I've literally done none. Like, I've just been in this hypertrophy phase for a good few years and just really trying to progress. Haven't felt the need to do any, dieting phases. I think we've both taken this hypertrophy phase quite slowly, just sort of eating just above maintenance, which has been the sweet spot for me. So I've not, got to a point where I've put on excessive amounts of body fat and had to diet. I've just taken it really slow and steady.
Yeah. No, your condition has held like really, really well. And I think that's hopefully really good for people to see, and that it's quite reassuring that actually, just because your goal is hypertrophy and you're building muscle tissue, it doesn't mean that you need to put on excessive quantities of body fat. You don't need to be in this like huge surplus, which some people enter into, which in my opinion often ends up being quite counterproductive. And
Definitely.
I think taking it slow and steady like you have offers so many different benefits.
Yeah.
What do you find for you is beneficial about taking a hypertrophy phase quite slow and steady as opposed to pushing up quite aggressively?
I mean, I think any woman is pretty much going to be the same in the sense that you don't really want to put on a load of body fat in one go. It doesn't make you feel comfortable. I've done it before and it's not a nice feeling. I prefer to still feel like I have some condition. Like, yes, I am in a surplus, but I don't feel like huge in any way, shape, or form. So I think it's quite reassuring to do that in a way. Still be able to see your strength progress and still be able to see your physique changing, but not in a way that's kind of like over the top at the same time. So it's quite nice to take it slow and steady.
Yeah, I also think it's a healthier way to go about it as well, because obviously there are negatives that can come with putting on an excessive amount of body fat in a short period of time, both psychologically and physically.
Yeah.
And if you can actually go about that in a much slower, steadier way, one, you're probably going to, like you said, be able to deal with it much better mentally and feel better about yourself. Body image, body confidence is probably going to be better, but also you're not putting yourself at as much of a risk from a physical perspective either.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially when it comes to building muscle as well. Like you can't build that much muscle in one go. So if you're eating in a huge surplus, all you're going to do is put more body fat on than you need to put on. The muscle that you think you've gained probably isn't as much muscle as you thought in the first place. Like if you came to diet and you sort of are a bit disappointed because you maybe didn't build as much muscle as you thought you had, and you'd actually put on maybe more body fat than you needed. It's just a kind of a pointless situation to put yourself in.
Yeah. What do you think about when, say, someone posts and they're posting like a physique shot or whatever, and they're like, oh, I've put on X number of kilos in, say, a few weeks and it's gone like straight to my glutes? What are your thoughts on that?
Straight to your glutes. I mean, you're very lucky if it all goes straight to your glutes. I wouldn't be mad about that. But yeah, it's exactly what I said, really. It's kind of like a pointless situation to be in, because you're not going to have gained that much muscle by, putting that much weight on that quickly. It's fine if you want to, by all means, go for it. But, just from a physique development perspective, it might not be the most intelligent route to go down.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that if someone does sort of say they see like a certain muscle group looks a lot fuller after putting on a decent amount of weight, a lot of that is probably just muscle glycogen and water anyway, and a good pump from the gym. So often if you see people that are claiming that they've gained loads of muscle tissue in a short period of time, a lot of it is muscle glycogen, water, and like a good pump. So I think it's really important for people to bear that in mind as well.
Yeah. And also just like genetic fat distribution, like everyone's different. So if you're lucky enough to store it all in your glutes in a nice way, then good for you.
Yeah. I think also another one of the benefits of taking it slow and steady is purely the fact that you can spend longer in a hypertrophy phase like yourself, which obviously allows you longer to progress with the exercise in your training program.
Definitely.
And longer to accumulate new muscle tissue, whereas you'll probably agree that when people go into these like excessive surpluses, they often just end up getting really uncomfortable and then wanting to diet again and cutting that hypertrophy phase short.
Absolutely. Yeah, you couldn't have said it more right. I mean, if you're trying to build muscle, you know, it's something that takes a very long period of time. So realistically, you want to spend as much time as you possibly can in that phase rather than having to break it up with constant dieting phases. It's not going to be very productive from an overall hypertrophy standpoint.
Yeah. And for the listeners, can you see progress with hypertrophy whilst you are at maintenance, or do you have to be in a surplus?
You can absolutely see it at maintenance. I mean, it's better to be in a very small surplus if that's what you're aiming for. But I think I've kind of accidentally stayed at maintenance for a while, and I've still seen a huge amount of progress. I think it's a very underrated place to be honest.
Yeah, definitely. What I also think has been really interesting has been your glute growth over the over the past month or so, as I'll obviously let you explain, but like, why do you think you've seen more glute growth over the last month or so than you have done prior to that?
When I have done in years, God. Well, I injured my shoulder/neck, so I've been training lower body like there is no tomorrow. So I have just grown substantial amount of glute in the last few months, I think. I mean, I've literally been training glutes like 3-4 times a week. So
Yeah, which I think is a great example of how frequency of hitting each muscle group is important when it comes to progressing with hypertrophy. However, I also think a really good point to make is that the reason you've been able to handle that volume through your lower half is because you've not been training upper body. Like if you had been training upper body like you were previously, you wouldn't have been able to handle that same volume through your lower body training.
No, definitely not. It's just been, you know, one of those times where you've had to use it as an opportunity to, you know, focus on what I can focus on, not worry about the things I can't do at the minute. And yeah, I've just grown some wham glutes in the last couple of months.
But I think it certainly makes a point of like, specialization phases definitely do have their place. Like if you have a priority muscle group, for example, and say like you really aren't bothered about whether you lose muscle tissue through your upper half, but you really want to grow your legs. If someone's listening to this and in that position, it might be, you know, it might be a good place to do a bit of a specialization phase and really focus on like lower body training if that's your priority.
Yeah, I think especially as females as well, like when it comes to lower body training, you can handle a lot of volume. And that's an important point to make when it comes to growing it, because you do have to prioritize it and you do have to put the work in. I was having a conversation with someone the other day who said you should only train lower body twice a week, otherwise you won't be able to recover. And I sort of think like, you have to be sensible about how you structure it. You can't have like crazy amounts of volume and you can't just train heavy all the time. You have to have the variety in there so that you've got some like some movements that you don't load as much, some body weight movements, some that you load really heavy, and not have excessive amounts of volume throughout the week. But if you do it in a sensible way, you can absolutely train them like 3 times a week well and make significant progress from it.
100%. And you're a classic example of that. And like, I think it's also really important to recognize that everyone's recovery capabilities are different, and also you'll adapt to what you're doing. It's like, and you should never go from doing like very minimal to huge amounts. You should taper
build
it
it
up.
up.
It's like when you did your friend's training session the other day.
Yeah.
So
I
I'll let
friend
you
the other
explain
day.
what happened when you did your friend's training session and like why did that happen?
So I'll start by saying when I train, I do mostly like 2 top sets of everything. So I'll have like a top set and a back off set, and then I'm done with that exercise.
Yeah.
I trained with my friend who tends to do 4 or 5 sets of everything, and I had the worst DOMs known to man for the next few days because I am not used to that at all. Obviously, where I train legs really frequently across the week, I physically can't afford to do that much volume because I just wouldn't recover from it at all. But I just decided, you know what, I'm just going to do her plan today. And I struggled so much.
Yeah. And that's a classic example of like massive changes will result in under recovery, really bad muscle soreness. That's not productive, but actually your body will adapt to what you're doing. So if, for example, you were to start where you are now and gradually taper your volume up, yes, you could probably get to where she is if you reduce your training frequency alongside that. But it's about looking at what works best for you and how many times you want to train a week, what your recovery capabilities are, what you enjoy. Because if you're doing 5 sets per exercise, but you're absolutely hating set 3, 4, and 5, and actually you're getting no connection and you're just hating every minute of it, then that's probably not going to be productive either.
Exactly. I mean, prior to my neck injury, I was obviously doing upper body in my old training plan, and I only had 2 leg sessions a week, but the volume in those sessions was massively different to the volume in my sessions now, and they absolutely killed me. So there's no way I could have trained legs more than twice a week. It just wouldn't have happened. Whereas now, by tapering the volume down and being able to, be sensible about how we structure it, has worked really well.
Yeah, definitely. And for those listening to this podcast, I know a commonly asked question is like, what is better for hypertrophy, higher reps or lower reps? What would your recommendations be from that perspective?
So generally speaking, if you do anything to failure, you are going to grow muscle. That is the science behind it. However, I don't know anyone that does really high reps to true failure. I don't think it really happens. So I think the sweet spot for hypertrophy is generally that sort of 8 to 12 reps is the gold standard, right? But in and around that place is generally a good place to be. What I will say though is certain muscle groups do tend to respond a little bit better by higher rep ranges, or having at least a variety of lower and higher rep ranges, for instance, the glutes, obviously. But I think as long as you are, pushing yourself to true failure, there's no reason why you can't grow. It's just making sure that you truly are, and you're not just a bit tired, so you stop.
Yeah. And when it comes to glute hypertrophy, what movement patterns should people have in their program if they're trying to grow their glutes in the entirety of their glutes?
Yeah, so having a hinge, definitely, or a few hinges throughout your plan. So things like hip thrusts, RDLs, having a squat pattern as well. Make sure you have abduction movements in there as well, such as abductor machine, like cable abductions, superband like X-walks, those sorts of things. Really important because you need to target all areas of the glutes, not just glute max. So people tend to leave out that one. You tend to leave out glute medius is what you'll tend to target with abduction movements. So that's really important.
Yeah, I think it's really helpful for people to know that, because often people will sort of veer towards what's pushed on Instagram, which often isn't very helpful. They'll veer towards like either really complicated banded movements and just sort of like solely stick to that, or they'll veer towards exercises like the squat, thinking that they'll build their glutes when they're first starting out, when in reality the squat alone is probably not going to result in the progress that they want to see.
No, definitely finding movements that you really get a good connection in your glutes with is important, and everyone's going to be different in that sense as well. Like for me, things like hip thrusts, Bulgarian split squats, 45-degree hip extensions, those sorts of things target my glutes really well, and I get a very good connection with them. Whereas other movements that other people might like, I might not get on with. So I think it is quite important to, you know, choose the things that you like and you connect with and just progress them.
Yeah, definitely. And so when you're in a hypertrophy phase and you're in that slight surplus, how frequently would you say you should expect to see progress, if you could give a recommendation?
That's a hard question,
And
actually.
what should you be using to like measure your progress?
So personally, I take pictures over and above anything else, but I know that not everyone loves taking pictures. So it is kind of personal preference. Obviously, scale weight is just irrelevant at the end of the day. But you know, I use it as an indicator as a coach rather than a true measure of progress, and only if someone feels comfortable doing it as well. But for me personally, I like to do pictures, but I do recognize that you're not going to see progress every single week, especially when you are, you know, in a hypertrophy phase. It's not like you're in a deficit where changes come thick and fast. It's going to be a slow trog, but you will see it eventually. And the other thing to keep in mind is, like, when you are looking at yourself every single day, you're not going to see the changes very easily. Whereas for now, like, if I look at pictures now and compare it to this time last year, it's vastly different, but it does take time.
Yeah, I'd say, like, in a hypertrophy phase, if people are going to sort of like compare pictures, it's probably more productive to do it over a span of like at least 6 months, so that you can actually see some solid progress. And then even looking back at like a year ago can be really helpful, I think. But comparing weekly, definitely not, because you're just going to see natural fluctuations in your body composition on a weekly basis anyway. So it can really mess with your head if you do that and then see those fluctuations and think, oh, I'm not making progress. It can be quite disheartening.
Definitely. And you also have to keep in mind, like, you don't have to do photos or anything like that either. I mean, you know, focusing on things like how you're performing in the gym, and if your strength is going up, you're going to be growing muscle. It's as simple as that. Like, it's going to be happening. So you don't necessarily need to be taking photos and analyzing every single part of your physique every single week, because you're going to be progressing. So just be confident in that fact.
And interestingly, sometimes I think it's almost like, you know, if you don't take progress pictures regularly, but you're progressing with your performance, you're focusing on how you feel, perform and function, it's almost like nice, because you might then every now and again look at yourself in the mirror and think, oh my God, like my glutes have grown, and like not really have paid much attention to that, but then just seen it and it have been quite a nice surprise, as opposed to you being obsessed over it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And you're more likely to notice the progress and the changes that you've made if you're not looking at it regularly, like you say. Yeah.
And sometimes, actually, I think when clients are in a hypertrophy phase, another way in which I often notice their progress is in training videos.
Yeah.
Because obviously, like, they've then got a decent pump as well in the gym, and they're contracting the muscles, they've got some food and water in their system. And it's under different lighting, and you can clearly see when someone's performing a certain exercise, sometimes a little bit of muscle tissue development. So sometimes I think training videos are quite helpful as well.
Definitely. I think you said that to me the other day as well about I can notice lower body hypertrophy in your videos. And I agree.
Definitely. I think it's really helpful to see the body moving as well. And obviously, some people are better at taking progress pictures than other people. So, like, if you get a client who isn't the best at taking progress pictures and they're not really like light and clear, then training videos can be really useful.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. I'm usually fighting with my dog trying to get progress pictures, so I'm pretty sure they turn out different every week.
To be fair, Phil, yours are very consistent. Like, I'd say you do a very good job of progress pictures.
I have a technique, actually. So I put my phone on video and I stick it to the wall with sellotape, and then
you actually?
Yes. I've done this for years, and it's elite, because then you don't have to rely on getting the picture every time you put it on timer. So, like, you can just stick it and then screenshot from the video.
Right. Because I used to have a phone case that stuck to walls.
Oh,
so
that's good.
when I was when I used to take progress pictures in prep, I had this phone case, and that's what I used to do. I used to stick it to the wall,
Yeah.
and do the same thing.
Yeah, it's good.
You need one of those phone cases so you don't have to get the sellotape out every check-in day.
You know what it is though? I'm so pedantic about the camera quality. And if you stick it and then it's on the front camera, it's just
Right.
good. I can't live with that. So I stick to my sellotape.
Maybe you need a tripod then.
Yeah, I mean, I do have a tripod. I'm just lazy, so
So you get the sellotape out instead.
Yeah.
I love that. And so another little sort of like update since the last time we did a podcast is you've now moved over to full-time online coaching.
Yeah.
So how long have you been doing that for? When was it that you decided to move over?
So I've been full-time for almost 2 years. Has it been that long since we've done a podcast?
God, is it?
Crazy. No way.
2 years. I remember like voice noting you about that. Has it actually been 2 years?
Almost, yeah.
Oh my God, that's insane.
Crazy, isn't it?
Yeah. So what made you make the original decision?
So it was something that I always did kind of on the side, like a side hustle, whilst I was working my 9-to-5 jobs before. And then actually it was COVID that sort of made me decide to go down that route. I mean, everyone found it tough at that time with their jobs, and I didn't like the uncertainty of it. So I just decided, you know what, I'm going to throw my absolute all into coaching. And I did, and I didn't look back.
Yeah. How has it been? And has there been anything which has been like more challenging than you had expected originally, potentially?
Yeah, I mean, it's been stressful, I won't lie. I know starting a business is not an easy thing to do at all, especially with a cost of living crisis, a pandemic, and also it just generally being a very saturated market. I think that's been the thing that I have found very difficult. I mean, the thing that I struggle with is that there's no sort of differentiation between people who have not qualified themselves and not educated themselves, but have the same job title as me and you. I think that's tricky, and I do find that very frustrating sometimes. Sometimes it comes down to, if someone's got more Instagram followers, they seem like they're a better choice, whereas they're not actually necessarily the best coach. I think that's been a frustrating one for me, for sure.
Yeah, I agree on that point. And I think that there's definitely been phases where I've sort of let that get to me. But now I've just sort of, I think, really learned to just focus on myself and sort of fighting a good fight, so to speak.
Yeah.
And staying in my own lane. Yeah, as opposed to getting caught up with obviously the sort of frustrating side of the industry where people are maybe in it for the wrong reasons because they see it as a money-making opportunity and because they enjoy the business side of it as opposed to actually helping people. And I think what's really helped me as well is going to like events such as like Level Up and such as mine and Charlie's event at the weekend, and actually meeting people in person who are in the industry for the right reasons, and actually being in a room full of them and realizing actually there are a lot of good eggs in the industry.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
That's really reassuring, I think.
Definitely. I absolutely love that as well, because there's definitely, not to say there aren't some incredible people out there doing incredible things, but it's just in amongst the rest of it, it's quite, when you do think about it too much, it does get to you. Whereas I think you're absolutely right. Like, if you are doing it for the right reasons and you enjoy helping people and that's what you love doing, then you've just got to get your head down and do that.
Yeah. And I think that a lot of people from the outside looking in probably think that our job is very like one-dimensional and probably very simple. Like, they probably think we just sit at our desk doing check-ins all day and that's it. But actually there are like so many different parts of what we do. Can you give people a bit more of an insight into like what online coaching actually consists of and the different elements of that?
Yeah, I mean, so you think of the basics being, you know, you get clients and you're sitting there doing check-ins, but then you've also got things like content creation is actually quite time consuming, and you have to sit there and think about it a lot. You've then got to think about how you're doing your sales, your email marketing. There's a lot more to it than just, you know, getting clients and sitting there doing check-ins, isn't there?
Yeah, definitely. And what advice would you give to someone who's maybe struggling managing all of that, who's just sort of like got into online coaching or is thinking of getting into online coaching?
Just lay out everything you have to do, like, very simply. And it is just it's a mammoth task trying to go through it all, and sometimes it is a bit intimidating. Sometimes I like to backlog my content and have a, you know, at least a couple of weeks of, I know exactly what I'm going to post, because there's nothing worse than getting to the day and panicking and then trying to like record a video or something when you don't really know what you're doing. You need to have like that all backlogged, and just try and make your systems as easy as you possibly can as well, because things can get quite clunky if you don't like actually put the time into making things efficient. When I say things, I mean like your email marketing, for example, having things, you know, prepared. If you sign up a client, for example, you'd like to have like an email campaign ready to go so that you don't have to then go through everything individually, because it is very time consuming. So just having things as efficient as you possibly can, and it is useful to put the time into doing that, so that, you know, when you do find yourself in situations where you've maybe signed up a load of clients in one go, you're not then panicking trying to sort everything out.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's solid advice. And what do you find the most fulfilling thing about what you do? And what has been like the best thing about the transition that you've made?
My most fulfilling thing is seeing clients like change their mindsets more than anything, mindsets and physiques, but mostly mindsets. I find that the most satisfying part, you know, when someone's actually genuinely happy and they've figured out that sort of light bulb moment of being able to get their physique that they want, and also fit it into their lives and do it in a way that they don't hate. Genuinely, I find like so many of my clients in that situation where they've obviously like done X, Y, and Z before, and they've just hated every second of it and not found it, you know, sustainable in any way, shape, or form. And it's when they have that light bulb moment that they're like, like I get it now. That's the most satisfying bit for me. Sorry, what's the second part of your question?
It was just like, what have you found the most fulfilling, and what has been the best thing about the transition that you've made?
Yeah, the best bit about it is literally that, like, I just really enjoy helping people. Like, where I was working in a 9 to 5 before, you don't get the same, like, I was working in sports marketing, so it's like it's not helping anybody. It's literally just like doing it for the company, and I just didn't find it anywhere near as satisfying as I do this.
I hear you on that. And my mind just went completely blank then.
Okay. It's late.
It's not late. It's just dark outside. It's not even late, Phil. It's 4:45.
Oh, it's late enough.
And I know what I was going to say. So I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit here. I know, but what are your goals with your business? Like, what would you like to achieve?
It's more just a case of growing my clientele at the moment. Like, I have a really good bunch of girls who I absolutely love coaching, but I just love to continue to grow that. Love to do more in the way of, like, I did a group photo shoot last year, which I absolutely loved, because I never get the opportunity to meet anyone, and actually like going to do that, I loved it, like being able to meet all the girls, have such a good day. So I'd love to do more in-person events like that as well. So that's definitely something I'd like to do next year. And yeah, just continue to grow the team.
Yeah, I love that. Would you ever consider like your own podcast or anything along
Do
those
you know what I have? It has been on my like side list of things I want to do. So I've been thinking about that one.
Yeah. No, I personally love the podcast. Like, I just think it's a great way to get your message out into the world, and also obviously chat with loads of other professionals in the industry, provide value, like help people. Like, I love it. So I'd recommend it. But obviously I'm biased.
I might have to pick your brains about. I'll
Yeah.
just start a podcast. And anyone listening to this, let me know if you'd be interested in listening to me ramble on a podcast.
Yeah.
And we'll go
If you want Phil to make a podcast, put this on your Instagram story and tag her or drop her a DM. And if she gets enough interaction, she will start a podcast.
Love it. Yeah, you're on it. That's the one.
And so I'll start on the coaching side first, and then I'm going to sort of jump back to hypertrophy. So if anyone listening to this is an aspiring online coach, what would your number one piece of advice for that person be?
Make sure you educate yourself. I know I'm hammering that home, but like at the end of the day, if you're coaching someone, you need to be 100% confident in what you're doing. Otherwise, it can be quite dangerous. So if you want to get a good step behind you and put yourself above like some of the other online coaches, just make sure you are clued up on what you're doing. Because I think at the end of the day, like you can sort out the business stuff fairly easily. It's not rocket science. Just make sure you know what you're doing in terms of coaching a physical person, and you'll be fine. Yeah.
I think on that note, Phil, like a lot of people these days tend to jump to getting a business mentor literally as soon as they start online coaching.
Yeah.
And they almost like bypass education now as if it's optional.
Yeah.
How, from your perspective, is that problematic?
It's very problematic. At the end of the day, someone can grow a business with completely the wrong intentions. They're literally just trying to get money. And yes, you can. I'm not saying you can't, but you know, if you're not doing it at the end of the day to help people, which is the point of online coaching, it's to, you know, to get people in the shape of their lives or the mindset of their lives or whatever it is that you value. Like that's what needs to drive you, not I need to make money.
Yeah. I also think it's worth bearing in mind that like a lot of the business coaches in the industry who are promising people the world, they are a classic example of people who are very money driven, and they will do almost anything to make more money. And a lot of those types of people will do the least that they can to get that money. And I think it's really important to bear that in mind when you're thinking of looking into a business mentor. Make sure that you do your research, make sure that you're investing in someone who is genuinely really experienced and great at what they do, and who you can genuinely learn from, and who is willing to give you their time, or obviously has a course produced which gives you the information that you need. That's fine, but make sure that you're investing in someone who genuinely wants to help and isn't just going to rip you off.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people that have gone into this business mentorship thing with kind of like they've seen it as a gap in the market. They've seen that they can make money from it, and so that's the route that they've gone down from a business mentor perspective, and that is, you know, slightly concerning, I think. I also do know of a lot of people that have gone down that route without having majorly successful businesses themselves.
That's what I was just going to say as well.
It's concerning when you think about it. But they've obviously established that this is something that they can make a lot of money from, so they've gone down that route. So
yeah, like personally, if I was going to choose a business mentor, for the record, for anyone listening, I don't have a business mentor, but if I was going to invest in a business mentor, it would be someone who has a very successful business, and who I feel is going to be able to help me with the things that I need help with. Like, not somebody who's actually just come from the fitness industry, had a failed fitness business, and then decided, oh, business coaching would be a great money-making opportunity, so I'm going to go down that route now. They've actually failed at their previous business. So how are they going to help you with your business? They might be making money now because they've convinced people that they are going to provide them with a decent service, but that business won't be long lasting unless they're actually helping people.
Yeah, you've got to look past the facade of the marketing as well, because half the time these people are very good at sales and sales pitching and getting you on to that particular course, and then not really delivering at all. So you've got to make sure you're 100% confident and you've got it in a contract that you can get out of it as well. I would definitely recommend that from experience.
Yeah. And I would 100% like talk to people who have had coaching from that person, business coaching from that person as well. And not just one person, and make sure that the people you're talking to, I would say, wanted to grow their business in similar ways to what you do. So for example, if you don't want to sacrifice your values to build your business, you also need to talk to other people who wouldn't want to do that either, because obviously there are ways I could make more money if I wanted to completely sacrifice all of my values and coach like and market what I would call in an unethical way. I could make more money.
Exactly the same boat that I'm in.
That wouldn't make me happy.
Yeah, no, not at all.
So I think it's really worth considering that. And flipping back on the hypertrophy perspective, Phil, if a woman is listening to this podcast and they really want to progress with hypertrophy, what would your top pieces of advice be for that woman?
Number one, make sure you're eating enough. I think that's a mistake that I made for years. I think the first 4 years I was training, I don't think I changed at all physically, because I just didn't eat enough. I think that's a really, really big one for a lot of women, because quite often they're quite intimidated by that prospect. But it's really important for hypertrophy. The other one is making sure you're sticking to a progressive plan and not just chopping and changing your workouts all the time. I literally recorded a video on this earlier.
Did you?
I was talking about all my mistakes that I made at the beginning. I'm going to post it maybe later in the week, so you'll see this. But yeah, that's another one. Don't chop and change your workouts all the time, because yes, you might burn calories, but you're not going to make the same progress in regards to muscle hypertrophy that you would if you were sticking to the same exercises and progressing them for a good block. The other one, I can't even think. Make sure you're getting enough recovery. That's very important. If you're anything like me, when I started training, I used to train constantly. I was terrified of taking rest days because I thought it wasn't getting me towards my goals. But at the end of the day, you're breaking down the muscle in the gym, but you've got to recover from that. And if you actually do take a step back and make sure you are resting enough, it will do you a world of favors in terms of how strong you feel in the gym, how your strength goes up massively, and it will help in terms of muscle hypertrophy. I can't think of anything else. You got anything else?
No, I think they're great points. And I love the last point of actually sometimes less is more. I've had so many clients come to me that are just training far too much or with far too much volume, and actually that's stopping them from training hard enough. So they're not seeing the progress that they should be seeing for the amount of effort they're putting in. So it's actually, let's just pull it back. Let's make sure your form is in a really good place. Let's make sure that your training is quality and you're not just doing shitloads of work, but ineffective work.
Definitely. That's a very good point as well. Form is crucial, and making sure that you're performing everything well. So that's something that I always do. You do as well. We both do with our clients, is making sure you look at training videos, especially, when they're in the early days of getting into a plan, because you need to make sure that form is spot on before they're really looking to progress those exercises.
Yeah, definitely. And where can anyone find you if they're listening to this on social media? If you have a website, what is your website? Where can they contact you?
Yeah, the best place to find me at the moment is on Instagram. It's just at Philly_Flemming. I'm just in the process of sorting out my website, so it's not quite up yet. So find me on Instagram and we'll go from there.
When Phil's website is up, I will put it in the description down below, and I will put obviously her Instagram handle down below. But thank you so much for listening, guys. As always, it means the world. If you do enjoy the content on the Female Fitness Podcast, please do subscribe, and share that you're listening on your Instagram story. And if any of you would like any supplements from Full Boar, you can use the code Danny10 at the checkout to save you a little bit of money. And I will see you in the next one. Thank you so much for joining us, Phil.
Thanks, guys.